Okay. Oh, so we are about 6 minutes late. This is the Town of Paonia Advisory Water Committee, November 17th, 1921. We have Administrator Ferguson. 2021. What did I say? Did I really? I'm showing my age, yeah. And my mom's age. Okay, 2021. So let's hope that doesn't set the tone for the evening. Administrator Corinne Ferguson. We have Mike Drake, Philip Siriani, Thomas Markle, Tammy Meck, your chair. So, first order of business is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Any discussion on this? Any changes? Any last minute additions? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Hearing none. We'll move on to approval of the minutes from the September 22nd meeting. And Thomas provided the meeting, so it is, okay. Yeah, talk about how you get those minutes.
So it was just
text.
a transcript from the YouTube video. I noticed that we talked about it, you mentioned it last time, like, do you want to do this? And I'm like, no. Takes up quite a bit of time. Half the time you guys don't even realize that I sent it. And we are required by the ordinance to have a record of the meeting, not necessarily minutes for the meeting. So I think the YouTube video suffices, and I'm happy to supply the transcript with names added. And I've also found a service that summarizes it. I'm not sure how it works quite, but it seems to do a good job. I sent that as well today. So feel free to give me feedback if anybody's unhappy with how that is going.
Mike? Everybody please remember to speak directly into your mic.
I read the thing that you sent out today about the minutes. I thought it was great.
Thanks.
And it's searchable, so I really like that. All right then, so if we could have well, we don't even need to approve this. It's not minutes, it's the transcript, so I don't know that there would be an approval for that, but does that work for everybody? It works for me. Just we have provided for the record a transcript, or Thomas Markle has provided a transcript of the September 22nd meeting. And no changes were suggested. Thank you. Okay. And he was just saying there could be errors. If we find them, we can just report those at the next meeting. All right, the first thing we want to talk about is, we talked about this before and took it to the board, not fully prepared for the response. That is changing the ordinance 2020-09, creating an advisory water committee of the town to allow for more members. And last time we talked about this, there seemed to be some consensus that, yeah, bringing in some new members, changing the ordinance to allow for maybe 5, and I think I had even heard 7 members would be beneficial. I guess I would like to just ask for any comments, any suggestions. I think at the last meeting there was some of the reasons were broaden the areas of expertise, foster communication and transparency, and bring new perspectives to the committee. So, discussion. Mike.
I completely support this, and specifically, if you look at the original, you said in-town user, out-of-town user, out-of-town water company, and I think it was Thomas that said we should be kind of specific, like if we could find someone who gets their water regularly at the hydrant, that would bring in another group of people being represented. And if there's, so I think that would be one thing that we should consider doing. And there are currently, not counting Tammy, 3 of us. If we got only 2 more, then we could be deadlocked 3-3. So we probably do need 3, so we can stage for an odd number, and that way we can't be deadlocked.
So you're saying stay at 3 or make it 5 or an uneven number?
An uneven number, I think. I think we need. I think 3 would probably be the minimum, and it also might be the optimum. If we get enough of us, we'll never all get to speak, or we'll be here all night.
So let me put this question out. What kind of skills, what kind of expertise, what do we want to bring to this committee that we don't already have? Would that be a better question to ask at this point? And if so, comments, please. Philip.
Yeah, I would support probably moving the committee to 5. We've had some, conflicts with schedules and all that kind of stuff. And in terms of, people, I don't think there may be enough in-town people possibly that are really impacted. I think in terms of skills, I did talk with Cassandra Schenk. Does anybody know Cassandra at all? And she stated she runs water companies. Oh, I'm sorry. She has a lot of experience in water companies, and also made a loose offer to help the town out with doing some things. So in terms of people, I think these people should have some basic level or some skill. A lot of what we're recommending is basically signing off on engineering reports, and then it goes to the town, and the town and the board can decide what they want to do with it. So I would support moving it to 5. The next question is who, and I'm not sure how that selection process should go.
So yeah, I think what we would be doing is opening it, in the event this does get approved, open it up to applications again, and see what skill levels. I don't know. Do we advertise for certain skill levels? Thomas, go ahead.
Yeah, I think rather than skill levels, I mean the original qualifications were the point of source of water, and we happen to have these you guys ended up with us. So I think if we just say, okay, we want to add X number of people, and we're talking about adding 2 more members or 2 more water user members, is that correct? So maybe somebody that hauls water, and if you feel that in-town folks are underrepresented, I think that they are. Maybe want another person from in-town, but it might give us a broader perspective, a stronger voice, a more representative voice. I do think meetings would take longer, adding more folks, but that would be up to the chair to manage.
Tammy, if I could
Corinne,
just,
yes.
I just want to clarify that. So what we're actually talking about is going to a committee that would be no less than 3 and no more than 7, because it already is a 5-member committee. It's a 5-member committee. It's
Okay, you
so
mean including Tammy and the town
yes,
representative
and
staff.
from
Okay.
ordinance, that's what. So I just want to make sure
Okay,
that was
yeah,
clear. You're actually
that's-
moving to a committee of 7.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I said 5 water users,
Right.
and I guess you guys are water users as well, but
Right,
you know,
right. Yes,
non-governmental.
absolutely. I
like
just wanted to make
public,
sure
just-
when we were
just
talking
regular
about
people.
Yeah, and I could be more clear. We're talking about appointed positions. We're not
Correct.
talking about, it would be 5 members, it would be.
Right.
So are you
For
saying
board
3,
appointed, I understand what
no
you're
less
saying.
than 3, no more than 7, including,
Members. Well, I'm
including
just reading it.
staff and,
Yes, I'm just
Okay.
reading it directly the way that it says in the ordinance. And so that was why I said that, because the ordinance says the committee shall have no less than 3, no more than 5 members right now. And so because we were just saying 5 members, I just wanted to make sure that I wanted to make sure clarification, because that's been an issue we've had before, that when I'm making the note, that I'm writing down and what you're saying as well. So that was, all it was clarifying.
thank you, Thomas. Okay, I see. So I thought you were saying it says that, but we would be no less than 3, no more than 7. Yes, okay. And for a moment I thought you meant, it already says that, but okay. I was going to say no. Okay, so yes, that is what we're looking at doing.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
exactly. Thank you.
I have a question based on that. If the number got as low as 3, it says no, that would be Corinne, you, and one other person.
Correct.
So do you
Yeah.
really want to leave that 3 there? I don't think so.
I think because it is a small community and you're not always guaranteed you're going to have people who are willing to do this. I think that is would you say that's correct? This is kind of like almost like a little safety net, that if members for some reason had to drop out, we wouldn't be below our lowest number. Or
I know the intent was to always have someone that wasn't a staff member on the board. And so worst case scenario, if there was no one that was interested in sitting other than one person, then you still have 3 people. You still have your 2 staff, your board member, your staff member, and one person who isn't an employee or sitting on the trustees board. So yes, that was the intent when they did that. Was a worst case scenario, you have 3 people, but never the intention to only have 3.
Bill, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out that, I mean, it's the board that appoints, so you're talking about a recommendation to the board for how many might be appointed. But since I'm here, yeah, I think that proportionally, the in-town water user is underrepresented, and I would ask you to get more used to making motions and passing and voting on it and sending a recommendation to the board. And I would suggest that that recommendation be totally my idea, you don't have to do it, that if the committee ever drops to 3, let's just close up and go home, that it should be at least 5 and however many more you think. So, thank you.
Any thoughts on that suggestion?
Yeah, I agree with that. My interest would be to have 2 more. I know staff and Tammy are members of the committee, but I think the representation we need is people other than you 2. Nice job that you're doing.
Great.
So my goal would be to add 2 more people in addition to staff. That would give us a count of 7, and that those people one.
A little closer to the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. And those one of those seats should come from somebody else in the town of Paonia, in my opinion. And then the other one, I think, could be ad hoc. I'm not sure, depending on what the interest is. Yeah. So
Would you like to make that a motion?
I'll make that. I would move that the committee be expanded to a total of 7, to include 5 members outside of staff and the council appointee. The recommendation of the board, yeah.
Yeah, we were going to work on that. Can you be a little clearer on what you mean by outside of staff? Do we want to make sure that we have X number of in-town water users, or, I mean, outside of staff? Do we want, are we looking to include 2 more in-town water users, or do we want to be that specific?
Yeah, the expansion would include one of the new members would be from the town of Paonia. The other member would be, I guess, based on application or appointments or something like that.
So what we're saying is let me see if I can just rephrase this and make sure, or restate this and make sure this is what you're saying. The motion is to recommend to the board to amend ordinance 2020-09 to expand the total number to 7, to include 5 members outside of staff and the board. Okay. Do we have a second?
Section 21020, number
Okay.
2.
So we would recommend to board to amend, these are always so hard for me, 2020-09, or section 2-10-20 of ordinance 2020-09 to expand the advisory water committee to a total of no more than 7 members, including 5 appointed members and staff and the board appointee. Are we there?
We're there.
Okay. Do we have a second? Okay. I do want to just make sure we don't just take this to the board and they say, well, what are you looking for? I mean, they want to hear why we want to do this. So can we just get a few more reasons, or do you think broaden areas of expertise, foster communication and transparency, and bringing new perspectives to the committee are enough?
That sounds like it should be enough.
I'd also like to state, maybe it was stated, that just as a better representation of the water users, more accurate representation.
The reasons are not part of the motion, so I just want to make sure that when we approve this, we have our ducks in a row. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And anybody opposed? Hearing none. Ooh, okay.
Did you want to vote, Corinne?
You know, Tam and I talked a little bit about that, and we were going to ask for clarification from the board on that. This ordinance is silent on it, and on other committees, the representatives that are staff or board members do vote. And so, but there never was a discussion about this one of whether or not we are voting members. So had you come to any?
I don't know the rules about the chair voting. Is the chair a tiebreaker? Is the chair, what?
If we go by the current system, the Board of Trustees is the only board the town has where the chair, as the mayor, doesn't vote unless it's a tie. So my assumption is that if it operates that way, similar to the planning commission and the tree board, although I know the tree board's much less formal. My assumption from the historical would be that you would be a voting member if either Travis or I would be. Travis, I'm only in his stead typically, would also be a voting member, but only one of us, if we were both in attendance, would be the voting member, which would always be Travis if we both were here. So I just know that when you and I had talked about that briefly in an email, and so I would be interested to see what the committee thinks, and then whether or not that's something that we need to get clarification from the board when they're reviewing the ordinance.
Committees that I've been on before, usually staff is not voting and not a voting member. And our purpose here is to make recommendations to you, and then you and staff present it to the council for their approval or non-approval. So the question would be,
that the town has, or board or committee that's created, that has staff in the ordinance as a seated member. Typically, only a board member is a seated member. So, but because of this type of board, it's different. So this really is its own animal.
Would it be appropriate to remove you as a seated member then?
That would be at the board's direction, to remove staff member as a seated member. And I know the reason that the board pushed for that, former trustee Bear pushed for that, was because you would want someone that is intimately familiar with the water system to be able to be part of the committee and provide information you wouldn't have if you didn't have a staff member on your committee.
So you wouldn't attend if you weren't a member?
I wouldn't what?
We wouldn't have anyone from staff who would attend if they weren't a member.
I wouldn't. I would attend the quarterly meeting, but I've committed to attend if they're quarterly, but I would not require Travis to attend a meeting.
Okay. Well, I mean, I haven't sat on any other committee
Right.
groups, so like, I'm not sure how they're running.
Yeah.
If you show
This
up for
one's
those or
different.
not.
It doesn't make it right, but as I read it, I agree with what Corinne said, is that we get to vote, Tammy gets to vote, she gets to vote. And I would support that because, for lack of a better word, if Corinne's sitting in that seat and she's against whatever we were going to do, we will at least know that we're sending something up that she's against. She could sit over there and smile, and we'd all think this is going to fly just right. And then she's going to say, well, by the way, I think it's stupid, when she's talking to the board. But I mean, but really, I think having either you or Travis here, for all the reasons that you said, one of the two of you ought to be there, I also support, therefore, you should be a voting member.
I would agree with that, and we're dragging this out. So what do we need to do to just keep it the way it is? Staff votes, Tammy votes, we all vote. Is that the spirit of the ordinance, the way it's written?
That was my interpretation, but again, if there's not a consensus from this committee that that's what the interpretation of the ordinance is, then my recommendation would be get clarification from the board.
Well, my vote is that that's what it says, because that's what I thought when I read it. And I just reread it today.
And two, staff can raise their hand and comment at any point if you don't like something, or if you do like something, or, please add to the conversation. That's, we are looking at our next item. What, once again, what do we want from the board, or, what can we do for the board? What do we want from the board? That's, how do I want to put this? That's, we want to hear from you, and I'd rather hear from you here than when we take something to the board and then find out you don't like it. So that's one of the things I would like from staff is participate. we want to hear from you. Don't we? I don't see you as here just to answer questions. I want to hear from you. So, in fact, maybe that's a good segue into number 2. This was a direction of the board to come back, bring this back to the board before the end of the year. What we want from the Board of Trustees, what we would like to see from the Board of Trustees, and what we can do for the staff. So that would be my first, my first suggestion is, we want you to participate. We want to hear from you.
Texting Travis that question too right now to see if I can get a response via text message.
Without getting into the weeds on how the board functions, how the staff functions, just, what do we want from the Board of Trustees? We take stuff to them and they, I don't get a motion, I don't, and, this is tough. You have some thoughts already. Mike, do you want to share some of your thoughts on that, please?
Okay. I sat down and thought about this very rapidly, but start off with what AWC wants from and what AWC can do for the Board of Trustees and the staff. From the staff and the Board of Trustees, what AWC at any time the AWC is talking about a Paonia water subject, the Board of Trustees or the staff should immediately let AWC know about any plans that are related to the subject at hand. And for the most part, I think you've done a really good job at doing that, Corinne, when you were here. Now, if the Board of Trustees or the staff has any concerns, short or long range, about the total water system, they need to bring up these concerns directly to the AWC. So that if they think they might have a problem, I think we need to know before it is a problem so that we can think about it and maybe come back with some suggestions. And what the AWC can do for the staff, if a staff member is uncertain about anything within the total water system, they should feel free to ask the AWC if we can help enhance their understanding of the system. So if they have a question about it, they should come and talk to us. And if the staff or the board members is uncertain about new water technology that they have seen, because a lot of times you guys run into it, and sometimes you go looking for it. And if you find it and you don't know anything about it, they can talk to the AWC to enhance, again, both the board and the staff about the new technology. And also, by bringing it to us, you're also enhancing our understanding of it. Because we might have to go back and scratch our heads and think about it, figure out what this means. But that's just my simplified version of that answers both the questions. What is it that you want from us? What is it we need from you? And
so I think
I got a copy of that. I gave it to Tammy. Y'all can share it.
so. I think maybe to sum it up, let us know what's going on. You know, bring things to us. This group is really hungry for information and something to do. So, up the communication, maybe. That's. I know I had some thoughts let's see, to provide direction. So I'm going down the list of what is in our ordinance of our purposes, and to provide direction on amending sections of the code that address the town of Paonia water system. For example, the town voted on, I believe it was November 9th, to consider addressing billing structure based on zoning districts to allow for residences. And I know we're getting into the weeds with this, but within the district to be charged a residential tap fee. Right now, I don't know if everybody knows it, but if you, I know Thomas knows this, if you live in a house, a residential area in a zoning district, you are charged a business rate, correct?
Yes. So I would be happy to explain it. And
Please do.
It's,
No.
I really don't think this is the appropriate forum.
You're
but
right. Well,
I'll tell you later
It's-
if
it's
you're
been-
interested to understand.
So,
We've been
yeah,
hashed
so
out,
I think
yeah.
that's one thing where we might, with 2 new members, might be able to add some feedback or come to the meeting and speak out in favor or against, or wherever you are. So that's just one area. The next one would be provide specific detailed direction on studying written reports, infrastructure analysis, et cetera. We need specific direction, and sometimes we'll get a new report. For example, the CIP, the water committee, again, sometimes I'm not on top of it, but the water committee was not even mentioned in that discussion, and I sent out a packet and said, hey, maybe at some point they'll ask us to weigh in on this, so please review everything that has to do with the water system. And again, I guess the board in that respect did bring it to this committee, but I'll let anybody else who has comments talk. I just think communication is just the biggest part of it.
I made some noise about this at the council meeting, I think a month or so ago. I think what we need basically is something to chew on. For example, I view this committee as sort of an overarching policy sort of group. The JD Hydro program we looked that over, we gave you a list of recommendations, and at that point, I think we've discharged some of the duties. You need, I think, to report back on how those projects were going, or if there's problems with them, or if we could help with that. So I would just ask the same thing, some meaty topics that we can look at. Second thing is, we're not professional engineers, and I don't think we're going to get into design drawings for pressure reduction valves. So again, I view our as more of an overarching policy group. And the third piece is that we could possibly, the town doesn't have a master water plan of any sort, near as I can tell, do we?
Not a formal plan, no.
And I think that's an area where we could possibly help, maybe bring in a consultant and sort of begin to start putting some infrastructure master plans together. Because right now, in my opinion, as an outsider, we're just reactive. We have a problem, we go, we send you a recommendation, and we hope Travis fixes it, or you do, or whatever happens. So I would urge that we have larger, more macro topics to think about.
So, if I may, so I would echo that, Phil. I think that I'm going to be candid. I'm going to be pretty candid, if that's all right with everyone. I think that for a long time, so I've been involved with the town a long time, and for the majority of the time I've been involved with the town, it's always seemed pretty reactive, and trying to figure out how to move from the place where you're reacting to just what's right in front of you and trying to think beyond that. And that is, that takes a lot of effort and a lot of thought to be able to do both, because you have to be reactive to what is in front of you and what's happening, but also be thinking long range. And to be frank, with this board being a new board, I was hesitant with involvement and speaking up, because I didn't want to feed into any kind of a feeling or any interpretation that I was trying to lead, direct, or control what this board was created for, because I felt that the board was really created to come in and have a more of an outside perspective based on some big issues that happened with the town. And so, and I also sometimes withhold my thoughts or opinion only because I don't want to have what I say or feel that what I say is then saved to be used against me. And so, to be frank, and like I said, I'm being very frank and very candid, I really don't want to operate from that place anymore. I'm really trying to operate from a place of moving forward and not looking backward. And I don't want to get on a soapbox or anything, but my time out with COVID was really eye-opening for me. You gain a real different perspective when you're that sick. And I really want to be part of mending those relationships, feeling comfortable to speak my mind and know that we can agree to disagree and it can be civil and we can have open conversations and talk about these things. I agree. An area that I'll continue to work on is to try to remember, and I've been trying to remember to inform and include the AWC with updates. Happy to give you a few right now. They're not meaty, but it's something so that you have ideas of what's going on. So, and these are things, some of these things have just come in. I let the board know last night. Information we just received about the lining at the 2 million gallon tank. We just had an inspection done and found that there was lead inside at 17.3% and lead outside at 8.3%. So on the outside of the 2 million.
Hang on a second. Did you say 17.3%?
Yes, it's not in the water. It's when they're testing through the lining into the tank, because it's a steel tank.
Yeah.
There is a 17.3% inside that. It is not leaching into the water. We're testing. It could. I'm not going to say it couldn't. It could leach into the water. That is not happening. But this was the other inspection we had done, so we knew exactly what we need to do when we reline the tank. So, and they found an 8.3% lead base in the paint that was used on the exterior of the tank. So, and again, this was done in 2005. This was before any of the staff that's here, not the ones that did this. And so, but what this means is that when we reline that tank, one, we have to do lead mitigation on the inside. Not required to do lead mitigation on the outside, but we should. We need to do both when the tank is emptied. Numbers, we don't have numbers yet on what that's going to cost, but I can tell you I don't think it's going to be cheap. So that information just came, we just got that information this week, and I informed the board of that last night. And letting you know that when I get the numbers, I will provide that to you. We've also received information that our meter system that we have, Badger Meter, they're transferring everything to the Beacon system. We've requested information on them for exactly what that means. Can we, because there are costs associated with the transfer, and I want to find out what those costs look like in comparison to updating so that we can get the antenna reads. Because if we're going to do any kind of updates, I'd like to see what the difference would be in cost. We already pay an annual for the Badger Meter system, and so it's a nominal cost to transfer to the Beacon. It doesn't mean we have to change out our meters or anything like that. It's just the software reading system. Right now we use a Badger Meter system, which is provided by National Meter, and Badger Meter is moving to Beacon, which will still be provided by National Meter. Let's see. Right now,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could we take this offline? Maybe get this stuff in writing rather than talk like.
Yeah,
have
I'm
it read
happy.
to us
I'll
right
send
now?
it. I'll send all the information
you.
as well.
Yeah.
I'm just
Appreciate that.
yeah, but if I send it to you in email, I want to make sure it's on for everyone that's here as well, that they know what's going on.
One question, do you have a bid on the lining from?
A bid on the lining? We had bids on what the lining was going to cost prior to lead mitigation, and it was coming in at about $800,000.
Right.
That was an estimate from our engineer. It's not actual bids from the RFP process, to be clear, from SGM. So right now, the reason Travis isn't here is because he's on site with the crew. They're obviously taking longer than expected, doing a dive and cleaning and inspecting the 1 million tank. And You know, Travis and I said I'd email him and ask him other things. You know, he said it really depends on like, how deep, how technical, and then how just down and dirty with things. He is talking about wanting to get a group together that maybe could be driven by the AWC of a group of volunteers to go up and potentially participate with town staff to do some spring cleaning up at the springs. Not spring cleaning around town, but springs cleaning, you know, fixing some fence, maybe taking down some of the overgrowth trees and moving them off site, things like that. So
Let's not get too far in the weeds
Right.
with this one, please.
That's actually the
Yeah, it is. It is. I know. I was just thinking that. So, okay, so what do we have so far? We want more communication. If something comes in about water, we really want to hear about it. Am I right on that? If it's a problem, we'd like to know about it. If it's a question, if it's new technology, we would like to at least have an opportunity to look at it. Am I speaking for everyone on this, or is there any disagreement?
Yeah,
Okay.
one addition would be things that you might need. I think I asked Travis maybe 3 months ago when I was up there at the plant with him what sort of improvements would he like in terms of a Christmas shopping list that possibly we could assist with. So I mean, there are some other items that I think you could give us to work on. Now, I didn't hear from him on that, and I was specifically interested in the SCADA upgrades, because I'm kind of in that area. So I think you should tap. We have different areas of expertise on this board, and I think if you should tap those if you're of a mind.
Sure. Mr. Bruner.
I would like to suggest a return to basics be part of your focus here, and review a little bit recent history and the board's or this board's inception. There's a water moratorium that I'm partly responsible for. So is everybody else that voted for it. My hope in instigating it was that it would light a fire under the town to do something about the water system. And instead, I think what's happened is we're a frog getting boiled, and the water's getting pretty hot, and nobody's talking about it. And I didn't get this thing started to shut down the sale of water taps in this town. I shut down the sale of water taps to get the town to wake up and take care of business and quit running a Ponzi scheme and do things right. And what I would ask you to consider is that every meeting you want to know what the staff and the town is doing to end this water moratorium, and report to the board if you think that's where we should be or if there should be something else going on. But with a focus to ending this, I really think that from what I'm sensing is that the people who fought the hardest against the institution of this moratorium have now turned it on their head, and they're using it to drive up prices in this town, to drive out people that have lived here before and don't meet up to the expectations of people who live in gated communities. I'm getting a little bit into the weeds and revealing my own true feelings here, but there's a water moratorium. You were formed kind of out of the fallout from that, and I would ask you to take that as one of your prime focuses and push the resolution of that forward with all due haste. Thanks.
appreciate that.
I'd like to respond to that. This is why we could use a couple of members who are affected by this. Thank you for reminding us of that. I agree with that. Consider every meeting what the town is doing to end the moratorium. In other words, and I think this would be good to go to the board to report at least every quarter. We are meeting quarterly to update us what on this list of all these items that need to be done, that we've provided a list, the town has provided, the staff has provided us a list. Start ticking off those projects and maybe even updates on each one. One of those big projects is the next item on the agenda. So,
Sorry, I really am. And I'm trying to make positive suggestions. And I would think that the first item would be to, number one, a resolution to end the moratorium as soon as you can. And number two, how do we do that? You know, I mean, how are we going to do that? And
it was written into what we voted on. It was written right in there. We've got to have that proof, signed proof by an engineer that says.
No, but how are we going to get there? Are we going, I mean, I think maybe there's somebody else has a way to get water out of the sky. It'd be nice. But we need a reservoir. Or perhaps as an interim, as a contract with somebody that has an existing reservoir, like bailed us out in 2019. I mean, doesn't it seem like, since there is a reservoir and it has been used before to bail us out, that we should have an emergency contract with the owner of that reservoir in case we have to go through this again? And are we going to be content with that kind of thing? Or are we going to find some place to build a reservoir, or does somebody else have a magic solution where we don't need it? But you kind of need to get a goal and admit or find the solution to the problem, and then how are we going to get there? Thank you.
Any thoughts before I say something?
So Bill, the question, you know, in looking over the, I don't know, few $100,000 worth of engineering reports that have been done in this community in the last 10 years, many of these problems have already been addressed. The issue of where to build a reservoir, lone cabin, rovers, I mean, all those things have been studied, and in many cases, there were reasons that perhaps they weren't done. One of the big reasons was cost. And so again, in terms of this macro plan that I'm thinking about, I think the question of whether we can have a meeting and satisfy the demands that we can lift the moratorium is going to be a very difficult and somewhat vague proposition.
But please help flesh it out.
Sure.
And you know, and one thought that I've had recently is, in light of this, the inventory study that comes up with $100 and however many million dollars of infrastructure to take care of over the next however many years, the 15 or 20 million bucks for a reservoir kind of pales by comparison. It really puts it into perspective. And so, however, you know, you're the committee and all of that. I'm just pleading with you to push this forward, however you think you can get a foothold. That's all.
So,
Corinne?
yeah.
May I?
Wh-
No? Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
What I was going to say actually is that I appreciate the suggestion. I agree with everything that Bill just said, and appreciate the suggestion about the emergency contract, because that had not occurred to me, honestly. But speaking with Rober Reservoir about expansion and use in emergency has happened, but I do agree that if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. And the things that he's talking about are coming up with a plan on identifying the leak location and the repairs, continuing to install the new metering and the pressure monitoring, like the pressure monitors that are going in on the hydrants, so that we can identify when there's locations with leaks and things. So I do have ideas on what things could happen specific to that. And again, when it goes to the reservoir, that is a big ticket item, a lot of money, but I know there are grants. I've had conversations that are some really good grants that are really earmarked for specifically this kind of thing, that are just for raw water. And that's what a reservoir would be the raw water. So.
Okay, regarding raw water, not only do we have to factor in the cost of the actual reservoir itself, pumping it, or piping it, rather, to the plant, then the plant itself also has to be upgraded. So there's other hidden costs that would be involved, and a lot of those are outlined in the JDR's report and previous engineering studies. If you want to talk about it in great depth, more depth, I'd be happy to. And the way that we end, the way that we begin to end the water moratorium, and I want to make sure that I'm clear that I, and in my speaking with the rest of the water committee, we don't feel that we have any right, and correct me if I'm wrong, any right to say that we are for or against the ending of the moratorium. Our task is to simply make sure that someone else has what they need to do that. And the first step to doing that is collecting data, getting good information, and giving it to the guys who have asked for it. And I will be speaking about that when we get to it on the agenda.
I would tell you too that the good thing about piping for Rober is that the piping was put into place during the emergency so we could get the water out of Rober.
Another reason I'd suggested about looking at the water rights up there, you've given us a lot of data on the other side, on Gelwick and Mays, but the water rights structure on that side of the mountain is a little murky, at least by my reading. So the first thing you got to do is see what you own. Next thing you got to do is see if you can make a deal with somebody to store water.
So how about if I can distill this down to have the board help us push for a completed master plan and enactment or a getting going on this master plan. We need a plan, and maybe with some push from the board, maybe with some a little more push from us, we can get that master plan done. And maybe, Corinne, do you have any updates on a water master plan?
Comment on that. One thing I suggested is that we don't have a budget either. Basically, we're just a committee. If you start writing master plans, you're going to need, in my opinion, a little assistance. For example, the quality of work done on this rate study plan. Possibly there would be some people that could kind of guide us in how to write one of these things, because they're very complicated and they're very time consuming. And the question is whether there's enough resources if the town is really serious to do that.
Okay, let's bring it back to the item, the agenda item. What does the AWC want from the Board of Trustees? And that was a directive from the board. So I need to complete this list and we can move on. We can get in the weeds later. We can talk about all this stuff. I just want to get this out of the way at this point. I don't know why we can't ever really get anywhere with this stuff. We all just have our own thoughts about the way things should be, and it is ask for a motion. All right. Can I have a motion on what we want from the board? What list of things we want from the board? Is anybody ready to make a motion? Yes, Paige, please.
I want, if you would look, here we go. There we go. If you have the ordinance 2-10-30, 1 and 2 is, and this was put together before the JDS report was in hand, right? To study and recommend to the Board of Trustees amendments to the sections of the municipal code. It's the second one that I think you have a lot of power based on this ordinance. To study and recommend to the Board of Trustees actions based on any written reports, infrastructure analysis, and engineering studies commission. I feel like the board doesn't know what to tell you. You were tasked with telling the board, and in my opinion, what the priorities are. Because some things have got to be taken care of before you wait for a master plan, because there's some things that are just breaking. So I think you all decided amongst yourselves with that survey what you thought was most important. So I really think the board, who isn't familiar with JDS, they don't hear this, they don't have your expertise, they're waiting to see what are your priorities. What do you think needs to be done first while a thought of a reservoir might be going on simultaneously? And Corinne, I'll turn to you to see if you agree with that. But I really think you have the power. The board is waiting for you to tell them what you think should be done, frankly, based on this ordinance.
And I would add, Tammy, that I think that we get so caught up on looking at what we're not doing, because you did do that. You did do this, you know, Thomas put this together, we voted, on where the priorities were. There was a pretty good majority consensus on every one of these items that that Thomas put out here, and you took it to the board with those priority lists, and some of those, the majority of those top suggestions were incorporated into the 2022 budget. So, I mean, that is a success. That is something you did. I think it's just reminding, because I know for me, and I know I wouldn't speak for the board, but I would assume that we throw a lot of stuff. I mean, look at the upcoming agenda. It's got over 20 items on it. And it's easy to forget. You get it, you see it, you said it, you forget it. And so maybe it's even getting some of this stuff on the Muni Doc and linking to it on the reports. Because when committee reports went away, the Advisory Water Committee regular report went away, so on the agenda. And so one of the things that I think would help is when there's something that the board wants, that this committee wants the trustees, I'm going to call them the trustees because I'm getting confused with boards and boards, that if there's something the committee wants to recommend to the trustees, we need to do it as an agenda item, because you don't have a report to report out anymore. So, because the board took those away with the committee reports. So, you're not reporting regularly to the board anymore.
Wouldn't that be a matter of the setting of the agenda? Isn't that up to the
Well,
mayor and you to put that on the agenda?
If there's a request for something to be on the agenda, absolutely. But I don't guess that there needs to be something on the agenda.
So the committees that were removed. We were removed with them. That was your choice, correct?
No, it was not my choice to remove any. The mayor's report is still on there. I was told to remove the committee reports, and that all included tree board and everything came off, unless when you have a meeting, you need to report something back to the board, then you go on as an agenda item.
Tree board still exists as well, right?
So tree board is just as well. That's the way it's been. It's been that way since they voted it. It was taken off the agenda. It's not been on there since.
Right.
So not done in any way to quash conversation or not have reports from the board. That's what occurred. And so when we're talking about asking the board to make a decision on something or provide direction, I would think the best way to do that is as an agenda item instead of just a report.
So here's my thought right now is I don't want to take something to the board again and have them go, well, what are you doing? I mean, when I asked, sorry, I am getting upset. What was it, the last thing I took to them, the possibility of more members. Right. It was, the mayor even said, well, you know, what are you doing? She basically said, we're just twiddling our thumbs, and it was an insult, and I don't ever want to see this item on this agenda again. We need to let the board know. Do we need to have a powwow outside of this and try and figure something out? I don't know, but I think at this point, I don't want to mess with this question anymore. It's at the end of the year. I would rather move on to something a little more important, like the condition of the springs. I move that we move on to something else because we are getting nowhere.
Yeah.
Do I have a second?
You can run it. You don't have to make a motion. You can just tell us what to talk about.
Then let's move on to number 3. We will table number 2. I'm sorry. And you know, maybe another board member would be more appropriate in this chair because I'm not getting anywhere here.
And I apologize. The intention of my comment was to give kudos for that you did accomplish something that was a big thing to accomplish, and to recognize that you did that. And that maybe if we're trying, I don't like to say push, but trying to support the board into movement or support staff into movement, maybe by doing it as an agenda item is a way to do that, was what my thought was.
Yeah, I saw Suzanne wanted to talk first. Suzanne.
Okay, I guess what I'd like to know, well, first of all, I want to let you guys know that you have an ordinance establishing water committee, so does tree board, but the town committees didn't, the standing committees, and that's what the issue was there. But that aside, when I read, and maybe I'm misinterpreting what this means, but part of your job is to provide a regular scheduled forum for any recipient of the town's water system to participate in a discussion specific to the water system, including but not limited to maintenance, repairs, rates, and management. So to me, I'm not sure there's been any discussion about this, but you're kind of there for the people too. And at what point, when someone's having a problem with a water system in town and an inability to have equal access to the water system because of the way things were laid down many years ago, to me it seems like they should have some recourse to come to you so you can make a recommendation to the board. I know there's someone in the audience right now who's having difficulty, and I'm just wondering, how do people get before the board if they're having serious problems without an ability to work with a staff and not an ability to move forward without an advocate behind them? And I was thinking the advisory board perhaps is that group that could take a little extra time to look into certain issues. And I don't know if this has been discussed at all, but hopefully. And then as far as the voting members, I think it's great to include the staff, but the problem is they get 2 votes then, because they go to the board meeting, and in addition to their vote that they are able to sway the water advisory board discussion, they also can now advocate as a staff member for the way they like to say things. So it's a little bit unfair in a way to think that the staff member could influence any recommendations coming from the Water Advisory Committee, because they'll be doing it on their own, and they have some pretty powerful influence as the Public Works Director and the Town Administrator. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Suzanne. Christina?
I just want to ask Thomas specifically, do you feel you accomplished enough on this board? I mean, it's been, say, 10 months that this board has been in place.
No.
Okay, and moving forward, what do you feel would help you accomplish more?
I'd be happy to talk about it offline.
Okay.
In short, teamwork, right?
Teamwork, okay. Because honestly, as the absolute layperson in this situation, but a citizen that is very concerned with what's going on with the water, it feels like this board has been in place for like 10 months, almost a year, and people have asked for stuff and it's not been gotten, and I would hope moving forward that changes. Thank you.
Tammy, I apologize. I don't want this to turn into this environment again, but to say that, and I know this always comes back to information that's been asked for from me or from Travis, but to say that Travis or I have single-handedly, unilaterally, intentionally withheld information to stifle this board, this committee, is ridiculous. That's a ridiculous statement. And to say that you ask for data and you don't get it is ridiculous.
Just stop right there. Everybody just stop right there. We are done with this topic. We are moving on to the condition of the springs now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. I just would like to be able to have an open conversation if we're going to move forward at some point.
I'll address that when I have my time to speak.
Just saying.
The condition of the springs, did you all have a chance to look at this? And I think we've already made our recommendations on this. I think this is something, but I just wanted to bring it back because it was presented to the board. Several photos and several comments, and the condition of the town springs. I'm sorry Travis isn't here to provide his side of this, but are there some recommendations? We have already said we want to have an expert get up there and look at the condition of the springs, come back and maybe draft a plan. Once the plan is done, start implementing the plan. I don't know what else we can do on this, but this is a big deal, and it was a topic of discussion on social media. I'm not on social media, but that's what I understand. And do we want to make another recommendation on this? And you know, just some thoughts. I hope you all had a chance to look at the photos, read the comments, and read Ms. Fogg's dialogue in that packet that I sent a link to. to you for.
Tammy. Yes, I looked through it, read almost all of it, and I don't know that it's been exactly said in this meeting, but when you talk about the Paonia water system, the key is those springs and the way they work. So, you know, that has to be a priority, and all the things that we've been talking about doing, that should be the top thing, because why didn't we get enough water back in February of 19? It's because all the springs weren't working right, and all the tubes weren't where they were supposed to be. It's not all of them, but it was, and Travis, in the report that I saw after, he said some of this has been cleaned up and some of it hasn't. He said that in the note with what we got. And so that, you know, everything's important in the water system, but if you don't have water coming off the mountain, who cares about any other part of the water system?
Agreed. Thank you, Mike.
So, yeah, it's important. Travis says he's working on it. And I would ask, can Travis write up something about his approach to working on the springs? What's his plan?
I'm sure we could do that. I can tell you what the plan is. We budget a minimum of $30,000 a year that goes to springs, but typically that goes to the repairs for the lines that are feeding the springs to the plant, and he's working his way backwards in that aspect. Minimal cleanup happens at the spring sites. There's mixed reviews on how much of that really directly impacts water and how much it doesn't impact water to have growth, and some fences that need repair. A repair of a fence isn't affecting the water. It is very possible that some of the other things around it are, and that was one of the items that I had stated before when I asked him about things that we could do, and that may be one. Financially, it would be extremely expensive, of course, to try to go up and do a complete spring rehab on all the main springs, but if we were able to work toward a volunteer group under our SRSA coverage to go up on occasion together and work together to do some of the clearing and cleanup and fence repair, we could get that done. Those are things we can add to with minimal impact on the budget, so that the majority of the budget that's designated for springs continues to replace the lines and get lines that are above the ground under. Am I talking too much, Thomas?
May I?
This is why I don't talk at these meetings.
I want to say that fence maintenance is absolutely critical. When I was working on a system in the Eastern Sierra, we had a deer come up and die at the intake, laying in the intake. Whatever we can do to make sure that that's not happening. What I saw in these photos tells me that these things haven't been touched probably 5-10 years. John Norris? Yeah, longer than that. I'd like to know that animals aren't getting into our water.
I have a slightly different viewpoint. I've managed a lot of springs. The fact that you have a picture that Ms. Fogg took of some overgrowth in the springs doesn't necessarily mean that the spring is not working. I've seen a lot of springs with willow overgrowth and not. It makes sense that you have trees and willows that are sucking up some water. The biggest problem is intrusion into your collection system. So the fence, holes in the fence certainly should be repaired. And I think most people that work on springs, when you say rehab the springs, if you take a crew up there with chainsaws and axes and clean that out, does not necessarily mean you're going to get more water. Rehabilitation of a spring means you take a track hoe up there, you dig it up, you put new gravel, you put all kinds of engineering stuff that's very experienced. So the first piece of information we need to know is the fact that the spring has an ugly photograph. Is it still producing water? Now, we have just come through a very difficult time, the last 6 months, a very dry summer, and looking at the inputs that are going into the plant, those springs are doing well, okay? So I would agree that fence needs to be repaired. Some kind of a rotating foliage issue. You need to go up there and cut the willows down from now and then. And then we need to look and see, you know, there's 33 different springs up there. There's about 4 or 5 on the Gelwick and the Maze side, but the Beaver Creek's that side over there. And I was looking at the GIS maps the other day to try and get to what Thomas is looking for as data. We don't really know how those springs are producing. And as a SCADA guy, you say, well, let's just go put some satellite stuff up there and take some measurements. But each one of those stations is $15,000, $20,000. They have to be taken down in the wintertime. So part of the problem that we have up there is how do we get to that data? Now, to Corinne's credit, you've been publishing on the Excel spreadsheet incoming to the plant. And those numbers that we're seeing about what's incoming in our treatment plant are extremely useful. So I guess my point is that, yes, there needs to be some maintenance, but I'm not sure that this is the disaster that has been made out to be on social media.
What's that? Oh, I thought you said something. No, we're good. So I think our recommendation remains the same then. Get a plan, get somebody up there to look at it, get a plan, start fixing them. I don't know if you all read the text that Ms. Fogg provided, but leaving out the editorial comments, she does say that get the board to approve an evaluation of the springs, rank the order of spring projects based on the importance of each spring in the total flow of Paonia water, and then develop a plan to fix springs one at a time until all the springs are in good working condition. Kind of like that. Do we want to make that basically as our recommendation, or do we want to, do I have a motion to make that as our recommendation? Because we need to recommend something. Again, the details of it, I don't think we can hash out tonight, but is that our recommendation? Philip moved. Do we have a second?
I second.
Any comment from the public before we vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and I urge you all to go back and read what she wrote. She has some incredible points. She's very passionate about this, and you know, there are some people, Mr. Bruner included, and probably Ms. Watson to some extent, who have been asking for this for a long time. Trustee Bear said at the last meeting that he was in attendance that we need to measure the springs. We need to get the measurement of the water. If anything would be considered for lifting that moratorium or finding that we can't, it would be, in my opinion, the measure of the water from the springs and the measure of the water that can reach the plants. Does anybody disagree with that? I mean,
Not at all. The question is the engineering, how to get there. I like Chris Lancey from Brown Hills Engineering. He's done some of our SCADA work. I would suggest that we invite him to a meeting and he can give us his expertise on just how we might go about getting accurate measurements on these waters. And, we could probably do that with a Zoom maybe, or maybe he'd be happy to come.
So you brought that up. I think the past 2 meetings. Have you spoken with them about it?
I have, yeah.
Mike?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Yeah, they had some COVID issues in their office, but
I see. Okay.
I think we'll shoot for next time.
Okay. Yeah. I think our next meeting's in February. Is that right? Okay.
so work toward so do I hear consensus that we would like to bring in Mr. Lancey if possible, even if it's via Zoom, and get him to talk about what he can offer and,
Yeah. Do we need a motion for that? It's not going outside this room. I don't
I
think.
don't think so. I think, you know, if Philip, if you could take the lead on that, we would appreciate it. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Baby steps, baby steps. Thank you, everybody. Let's move on to new business. Develop a process for the Water Committee to submit ideas, suggestions, and requests to the town. I think that I would like to see just the opposite of this. Anything that comes in, the town informs us. Suggestions, comments? Thomas?
Yeah, I think that just adding AWC agenda on town board meetings would probably suffice. And then any motions or associated material that they might need could be presented at that time.
So that would be a recommendation to the board or to the mayor and the board to.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
not sure exactly how that process works. Corinne, do you have any leeway in setting the agenda? Are you, do you have that?
I can confer with the mayor and add a quarterly agenda item that's specific for the Advisory Water Committee following your meetings.
Thank you.
Do we want quarterly? Is that what we want as a quarterly report, or do we want to be on the agenda monthly?
If we're going to meet quarterly, I don't know how we come up with anything. I mean, I suppose we could if we're doing work by email, but.
Quarterly unless otherwise, okay. Yeah, if you would,
know.
and I will speak with her on that as well. Thank you. Bulk fill station cost of service analysis. I don't know if all of you have gotten a chance to consider this. It has been discussed by the board. I do not recall if there was any motion made on that.
No, the board just accepted the information. No action was taken.
Oh, no action taken. I think this would be something if we could come to some consensus on on whether or not the data is enough to get an answer, or is it more of a moral question, the price of water? So, Thomas.
As I recall, I think this was the same document that I spoke about at the board meeting. Sorry, I believe that I read this document and spoke about it at the board meeting. I'm not sure when. It was in the past 3 weeks, maybe, or three meetings, say. And the comparison, I'm not sure if the public has this, but the comparison is based on the cost of the improvements to the system drawn out year over year. And just simple math to come up with a rate to do that. But what I said at that time, and I still think is very pertinent, is that this doesn't account for any competition, because in the, you know, when you're at your house, you can only get water out of your tap, so whatever they want to charge you, they charge you and you have to pay it. Thank you very much. These guys can go wherever they want, the water haulers. So a lot of them are going to Hotchkiss now because their water's less expensive. The gas is cheaper than the water. So, I mean, not per gallon, but you know, the cost of gas is less than the difference. So I think that if we actually reduce the price, or at least match whatever the closest competition is, if we make it so that we are more convenient, the number of sales will actually go up. I don't know if it'll actually increase the value. You know, that's something that can only be determined experimentally, in my opinion. You have to try to find out, but it might be worth it to encourage people to use it to reduce our prices.
Do you want to make that as a motion? We can discuss it.
I move that we recommend to the Board of Trustees that the, do we call it the bulk fill station, be priced in accordance with surrounding similar stations. So I say alternative stations.
We have a motion to recommend to the Board of Trustees that the both fill station be priced in accordance with surrounding or alternative stations. Do we have a second? I second it. We're not going to discuss it if we don't have a second. Okay, Mike is seconding. Okay, discussion from the committee or the public?
I have a comment. The town prices are about 3 cents a gallon, I think, at the station, and my reading of the rate report shows that you're selling about between 16 and 20,000 gallons a month. I checked with Pick and Mesa yesterday or the day before. They're selling about the same amount of water, 16 to 20,000 gallons a month. Their rates are about $0.015. They've gone up a little bit, and they don't require that you get a prepaid pass and get a license. So a lot of people don't like the system because you have to go to the town, get a $50 essentially license fee, and then prepay a credit card. Hotchkiss has the same system that we do, and their rates are a little bit cheaper. So I guess those of you that read the rate study, there's a very nice analysis in there about the way you priced it, and I think, Corinne, you guys priced it based on the payback. It was about $20,000 to put that unit in, and you priced the payback, I think, over 2 years or something like that. I can't remember your amortization rate, but I think you would. I think the barrier is still getting the $50 license fee, and the barrier is having to purchase another debit card. So I'm curious from staff, do you have any opinion on that?
So there is the $50 initial account setup, so the first time they come in, and that's mirrored directly off of Hotchkiss. There isn't a card or anything like that. It's prepaid for water, so you can come put $1, $5, $500 on and draw down on your water. You get reports of that. The reason, of course, that we don't use a quarter system was very much driven by a board. We wanted a system that was trackable and not quarters going into a bucket that was then being taken to the bank. Also, banks locally are more resistant to change and receiving loose change. They make you put it through a Coinstar, which charges the town money to put the change through the system. So that was why they moved away from the coin system to a PIN system. And also, yes, Hotchkiss has the same system and their water is less, but their infrastructure is less. They have a less complicated system than we do. And part of this basis also was not the town of Paonia trying to be in competition with its neighbors. It was the town of Paonia trying to charge fees, to assess fees to pay back for the updated system, and to have some buy-in from the users of the bulk station into the infrastructure through their water rate, because they don't have that buy-in through base rate and the way that the in-town and out-of-town customers do. So that was the justification.
So my question is, if you lower your rates, whether you will really succeed in the marketplace or not. My suspicion is that most of the water haulers I see are using Pick and Mesa for large volumes. And I don't know what the numbers are or who you're selling to, but
we do have a few commercial.
It's not a lot of money at the end of the day, 16,000 gallons. No. It really is a service and not a revenue generator. So I'm not sure I'd waste a lot of time on it, actually.
That's absolutely true. We have a few large haulers that have accounts with the town, and our metered usage on the new system at the new rates is not very different than our metered usage on the old system.
I have a question.
Mike?
Why does the town offer this? I mean, what's the town's reason for having this type of water delivery available, for lack of a better word?
That's a good question. I know at staff that many times there's been discussion about whether or not to continue to operate it. especially since when and if there is a ever serious situation, those tend to be the first places you shut down. And so if people are dependent on it. So that is a good question. Why does the town offer the bulk station service to individuals who aren't connected? One reason could be because we don't have the ability to connect them right now. They couldn't connect if they were within an annexation area or able to connect on a water company. But that, I would think, would be a philosophical discussion at the trustee level as to why we continue to operate the bulk station.
I kind of feel like the definition of neighbor in this area is people who use the same water system. That's just the way I feel about it. And I think that providing water for people on the mesas or who simply just don't have plumbing is a service that I feel we can provide just to be like inclusive of the people that live in this area, to bring them in as neighbors, to make sure that they can live, you know, to keep them alive. And I guess if you shut it down, that's fine, but it just seems like you're creating an inconvenience because the income isn't high enough, or you know, for whatever financial reason. But I often wonder when we talk about like, you know, whether amount of money is small or large, we use that justification however we want to see it. So if something's inexpensive, it can be said that we should, you know, continue that because it doesn't cost much. Or it could be said that because it doesn't cost much, doesn't generate much revenue, why even do it, right? So two faces, literally like the same coin, can be used to justify whatever we might want to do. So whatever it costs, I feel the people who use it should help pay in, and that in order to make it function economically, we have to compete. It's something that this town has not, and I don't mean compete as in like punish Hotchkiss, right, or anybody else. We just have to make it appealing. We have to do a better job of service so that people want to use our system if we want them to use it. I guess that's up to the board.
Mike.
Well, just to be clear, I wasn't saying we should close it down. I was simply asking the question, why does the town have this going? That's all.
Because we care about our neighbors, in my opinion.
You can't answer that because
Right.
you're not part of the town.
In my opinion, because we care about our neighbors.
In your opinion.
Okay.
Comments from the public. Mr. Brunner.
Yeah, I think it probably did have a lot to do with neighborliness in the old days. And now there's a situation where people have established their entire investment in life on their homestead or their property based on hauling water. It's a very fragile place to be. And, you know, there's a line in the water ordinance that says that all users will be treated the same. Are they water users? Should they be treated the same? The cost analysis was based on the use of 1,000 gallons, and I was kind of surprised. I just quickly looked at some numbers there, and I was surprised that that's actually sort of close to what people are actually using. I remember in the late 90s, I was on the board, and there was discussion about this, and I was surprised that the average user at that time was using about 4,000 gallons a month. And so this makes me think that there really is a market force here that's, or perception or something, that I would suspect, if that number was accurate, and I can't swear that it was, that people are going somewhere else for some other reason. And if you carry out that cost analysis based on not a usage of 1,000 gallons a month, but of more like 4,000 or 6,000 gallons a month, the price structure becomes much more balanced with what everybody else is paying. And the last comment I would make is, it's a dangerous precedent to say that you have to pay for this whole system because you're using that card, because who else has to pay every time they fix a pipe that goes to your, down the street that comes to your house? Who else has to pay to pave the street to get to your house? I mean, that's kind of why we're all in this together, and there's, you know, you can't charge everybody for every piece of pipe that goes to their service. So, thanks.
I mean, on the rate study shows that the citizens in Paonia are paying $2.80 for 1,000 gallons, and the what you're charging at the pump is $3 1,000 gallons. So your rate structure for purchased water is very close to what the rate study came up. So again, I think we need to move on. I mean, my view is that currently we live in an ecosystem of water, and you know, for 20,000 gallons a month selling, if we start selling 100,000 gallons a month out of the purchased water vendor, then that's a different animal. But I think for the moment, just leave it alone, because a lot of people do depend on this. So I would not support this motion and just leave it the way it is.
Just to be clear, it is $3 per 100 gallons, not 1,000. Yes. Ms. Watson.
I guess this is a touchy issue because I too would like to be sympathetic to people who don't have access to piped water. But the reason why our water system exists is because of me and all these other people who are hooked up to it, who have these base rates that they have to pay every month whether or not they use the water, and they're just going to get a lot higher. So it's difficult because since our uses isn't really based on the gallons that we're using, and the people who use the system at the pump don't have to pay the base rate, it's a little difficult. How do you like come to terms with these two different ways of billing? They're being billed per gallon of use, and we're not. We're being billed through our base rate basically, and it's expensive for single people. It's a lot more expensive for someone who lives by themselves than a couple. So I'm subsidizing big families. And so the whole system, it's like it's hard to look at it and figure out what's really fair. But I would hope that you could have access to that water study and the information that was sent to the billing study. I mean, because you are the water committee, and I think you have access to all that information. And now that it's been public, it would be nice if you could look at that if you wanted to get more information to come up with whatever your thoughts are. Thomas, thanks.
They have received that. When it came in, I did send that out.
So, and if you take it down to a flat number based on what Suzanne was just stating, so if you have an out-of-town residential user after scenario 6 takes place, they're roughly their bill with just their water bill with 1,000 gallons of usage is going to be approximately $39.40, and for 1,000 gallons at the bulk fill station, a bulk user's spending $30.
But I mean, it's not a very, the comparison doesn't mean much when you compare somebody's, you know, if you're going to have a fill station versus a house, like, that's not a good comparison, in my opinion.
The fill station is for a house. Majority of the users are using that water in their home, and it doesn't need to go on there, Tam. As far as my input, the board asked for a comparison based on our users and what it took with what we've got to pay off the system, and that's what was provided in this analysis.
Did you want to say anything else, Thomas? Okay.
No, I mean, what's there to say?
We have a motion to price the bulk fill station in accordance with alternative sources. I believe I got that right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And no vote for Mr. Drake, so do, do we want to pursue this? Are we at loggerheads here? Are we just not going to get anywhere with this? Or do we want to try and, it's already 6:41. Any recommendations otherwise?
The motion fails, so the town will continue to do what it's doing, so let's
Okay,
move on.
let's move on. Thomas, you're up.
Thank you. I have to set up my projector here. Corinne?
Just go ahead.
Okay. So, I have a couple of documents that I'll be going through. I'd like to start with a history. See if it picks up where I left off, maybe. Maybe not. Sorry, I'd like to use the overhead projector, but town can't accommodate outside laptops or whatever computers on the network. Okay, here we go. Yeah. Okay, so I think that I'm going to start with a history of what I've asked for and dates according to the minutes. So January 30th, 2020 was when, that's 21 months ago, JDS Hydro requested 10 years of records at their kickoff meeting. And they were pretty broad in what they wanted. I think, in the time since then, there's been quite a bit of change in exactly what's acceptable and what's not. Let's see if I can do this. It's a little crooked here. Okay, cool. So, January 30th, those guys asked for it. At our meetings, February 10th, I asked for it. From an email to Mayor Baccarin, asked for some clarification as to what I was asking for from a town meeting. I CC'd all you guys on that. February 24th in our meeting, I asked. March 24th in our meeting, I asked. That's when Travis said that he'd get it in 2 weeks. May 3rd, I asked. May 19th, I asked. June 16th, I asked Plum Starnes if I could get some information or what he wanted, and he was a little dodgy. He didn't want to give us anything on over the phone. So then that day, I did a quarter request to town to try and get the meter information, the historic meter reads based on anonymous just meter numbers, along with everything the town does in a database backup. And I didn't get much of that on we also talked about it in the June 30th and July 21st meetings. So, in my opinion, my efforts to get this information have been just hamstrung. And it's really the point of frustration that I think colors my mood a lot in these meetings. So what I got was this. And this comes from Corinne, and I believe that this is the same data set, you can correct me, Corinne, that you provided to Ty at about the same time. Yeah? Okay, cool, thank you. So what we got was a list of, these are the meter reads, right? So you can see here we have a meter ID. This is a multiplier. This means that for each tick on the meter, it counts 100 gallons. And these are the usages that correspond to those. So this data set's pretty big. This is everybody in town for 1 year. Oh yeah, I only got 2020. Ty only got 2020. This is the only year that we have that's been provided to us so far. So I asked for everything.
No, I said that's all he asked for.
That's all he asked for. Yeah, I asked for everything. I got 1 year. So this is 25,605 records. And combing through this, we see that there's a lot of duplicates. You can see these two here are duplicates. There are some that are empty, some that are missing. There's a lot where there are dates that start on April and only go through November. And I apologize. I have this kind of cognitive block, I'd say, where the names of the months and the numbers of the months don't always line up right in my brain. So if I say March, I might mean May, and if I say May, I might mean March. And if I read the 5, I don't know what month that is. I have to count it out on my hand. Okay. This is the original data that I was given. This was the original summary that I was given. And I didn't find much quality in that. So I had to do a little bit of curation. I removed those duplicates. Oh, this is gonna, I hope I don't have to move all these. Yeah, I can't move those. So I removed all the duplicates. I removed anything where there was empty, any holes in it. And what Ty did, rather than remove them, he took these, like the ones where, okay, it starts in April, right? He just took that April number and rolled it back to January. So he did January through March of the same as April, according to what I saw on his chart. I don't know if that's correct or not. It's just what I glanced
Would you like to know what the duplicates are?
Sure, yeah.
It's a move in, move out. So it's one customer that has that meter that lives at that address, and it's how much water they used in that month, and then it's when another customer moved in, it's the remaining part of that month and the water they used.
Okay, yeah, that's a different sort of duplicate. This is the duplicates I'm speaking about are the exact same number contained in the data. This is the same thing written like whatever 8 times, right? So like it's just a repeat of the number of the data.
And that would be because those are meters that are manual reads, and those months are the months that they're estimated, and so it duplicates the same reading. It is November is an estimated.
It's consistent. It's for every like this entire meter. Okay, so 99554.837 meter here has a duplicate for every month, like 6 times in this data set. Okay, so it's just and I don't know why it happened. It's just a artifact. Yeah, it's some artifact of the system, right? That's fine. It's really easy to take out. So I took that stuff out, and I started reading through here, and there's a couple of things that really stand out to me. These zeros, these might be what you're talking about, the move in, move outs. There were quite a few of these, and they'd be marked on the right with a green. They'd be highlighted with on the right with a green if there's a duplicate month. Sometimes there's 2 reads per month, and that would explain it. Move in, move out. Great. So there are also a couple of other things that are very interesting. We have negatives, and I assume those are leak corrections. So we have a negative 98,000, which was rolled back on the meter. And we also have, I hope it's not hidden behind one of these charts. I can find it. Anyway, there's one that's really interesting. I'll find it over here. So I made a fresh summary of all of this stuff that's a little bit more compact. So on the left we have each row is a single meter, and this is for all the reads for 2020, right? And this is the gravy, right? This is what we're looking for right here. And we'd like them all to be like this one, where we have full data, we have all these numbers, right? And what we end up with are these, let's say, curves that you can see when I first started. So this is that first one that's plotted, and this one is a 100-tick multiplier. So my assumption is that this is a group meter, right, that goes out to a company and is probably averaged across however many users. So that's why it has this shape. We can see that our winter use is very low, as we expect, ramps up in summer and tapers off. So we have this neat shape, and this is kind of the pulse and rhythm of life in the valley here, because it determines how we live. So I just think that's kind of cool to see, but not really useful as far as analysis. So I'm going to make a quick change over here, see if this has, forgot about that. Sorry, I have to fix something here real quick on this. I have this open in 2 places. I have it open up there so that I don't mess it up while I'm showing it. I have it open over here. So hopefully this updates over there at the same time. Sorry for the delay. Ah. Okay. Something went wrong. Reload. Cool. All right, so we'll sync here. So what we can do is make a little a graph, like a little mini graph of each one of these, so that we can kind of get a, rather than just a row of numbers, we can get a sense of the use of this individual user over the year. So we can see there's quite a bit of variety here. That they don't all follow that big hump, right? That seasonal hump that we liked at the top. They're all kind of different. And if you go through all these, I'm not going to really, I don't have any highlight to go through, but I think what they correspond to is people that leave for winter, right? Some of these guys do a lot of use throughout summer, and then it just flattens out and nothing happens through winter. Some of them are real high early in the year and they taper off. I think that this would probably be someone who maybe has an irrigation system, you know. They don't need to irrigate, so all their outdoor water use comes from some other source. We don't meter it. And what we can do, and what I intended to do, was to parameterize all these things, all these shapes, and say, okay, we have X number of snowbirds, right? And Y numbers of irrigators, and we can group those into cohorts and determine what we want to do with our water system based on how the people are using it. And that's a little more advanced, I think, than really what we want to get into at this point. I have fought for, whatever, 10 months to get this far. If I'm going to try and get that far, I give up. You know, I'm not here to convince anybody what their job is or how to do it. I was just trying to help. You know, I'm a volunteer, so if nobody wants, like, obviously, Corinne, you don't want me to have this for some reason. I don't know why.
No, the only part that I didn't want to give you was the part that is redacted information. And we sit in these meetings and I say what format and you say any format, and then we leave, and when I come out and ask you, you say, no, I want it different. And so I never know, and that was the only thing that I ever said I wasn't going to give you was information that's protected.
Okay, thanks. That wasn't quite my question, but anyway, I think that's kind of useful, right? One interesting function of this, oh, I'm on the wrong side. Oh, here we are. Okay, the reading summary. So these are the meter reads, and these are the actual trend lines from the physical meters themselves, right? So I would expect these always to go up. They can only count up unless they're replaced. And that's, in that instance, they go back to 0, one would expect. But there's a bunch of them that go down, and I don't know why. Corinne, if you might tell me. I don't think it would be move-ins or move-outs because this is the physical read on the meter. But there's a lot of them that do this, and they've been highlighted in green on this. So we can scan through. This one goes down there. You know, they kind of pop up here and there. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I'm not privy to the system, so I can't really say. Aside from that, we also have the information that's being given to JDS for their analysis regarding the moratorium and everything that they have done. So I'm going to go through that stuff real quick. Just want to make sure that I don't have any notes or things to say about that stuff.
Thomas, I have a question.
Yes, please.
What I'm seeing over there is that you're building a personality profile for water use. Your squiggly lines there
Yeah.
are essentially attached to some user.
Well,
So the real question
maybe,
is, what are you going to do with that information? Is this going to be
well,
part of a billing program?
no, as
People that
as
have the squiggly lines that go up, going to get charged more than the ones that go down? What's the numbers?
not necessarily. That's really up to the board. I think is to determine what to do with the information. That is the board of trustees. I think that my interest is more in providing them good information. So if I can say we have, say for example, we have 50% of our users, and I'm just making this up, 50% of our users use a lot of irrigation, we think, because we see this shape quite a bit. If we can, and this is an idea that was thrown out by JDS in one of their Board of Trustees meetings, if we can divert some of the raw water from our treatment plant, rather than spilling it, to a irrigation system in town, we can displace some of that primary use. With rather than treated drinking water going onto yards, we can use untreated raw water. And that was the first time that I'd heard that concept was in that meeting. And if that sounds like something the board would like to do, actually Thomas Wills of the North Fork Merchant Herald has been having articles from 1910 where they talked about this exact same process. Right. So if we can show the board, say, hey, we have 5 million gallons we can save every June bypass the treatment plant with 5 million gallons. I think that might help them to make a better informed decision.
And you're going to put that water into the ditch company?
It's just an example. Who knows,
Okay.
Like, I don't know.
I guess my overarching point is that if a customer has a meter and he pays for the volume of water every month, do you have a right to go nose around in his personal business about how he's using his water?
Not really. I don't know. I guess that might be a legal question because it's a public use.
It will come up in this county.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's a public resource. So, in my opinion, and based on the reading that I've done, a core request for a public resource, a public record regarding a public resource, it would be something like paying your property taxes, where everybody has a right to see what you are using and what you're paying for it. So I think that town has a different view on it, but I don't necessarily think it's worth pressing the legal question at this time to try and get that information. And we've talked about this before.
I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, I don't think we're cops. We're not water cops. We're water users. And I think that just being a good neighbor is my interest.
How do we get to the information about? Oh, I'm sorry. How do we get to the information about how many of our town users have irrigation water? I mean, how do we get to that?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. That would be a question for water companies. We can find out if you want to do that outright.
So that's a question for inquiry. I mean, is it Paonia Ditch? I mean, who are these water companies that are providing this?
Right. Yeah.
Well, the Stewart Sprinkler System is one of them. My
but I'd like to continue if I may. We're getting a little off track. Okay. So what we have, this is the information that JDS has been provided. So this is the nope, wrong one. Reports. Yeah, 2016. Okay. So right. This is where I was. Sorry, a little off track. So these are the monthly totals that have been provided to JDS. The place I got this was from what's been provided 2016, 17, 17, 17. Okay, yeah. And I think it was this one. So this is the consumption analysis report that was provided to JDS, and it's not going to load now. Yeah, I don't care. Just give me one of them. I might have one over here. Sorry, I can do this. Oh no, Ty was using somebody else. Oh, here we go. Ty was using, I think, Corinne or Cindy's laptop and using this up here. But I brought this from home because the little people aren't allowed to use the town network. So this is what was provided to JDS. These guys got a sheet, one of these sheets for every month from 2016 to now, to 2021. So we see on this, it's broken down by the in-town, out-of-town, in-town commercial, out-of-town commercial, and I'm not sure what this is, rate 198. But
Can you make that any bigger?
yeah, I think I can. Yeah. Okay. So we see a couple of things happening here that I think are kind of interesting as well. So this is all of this information. I just retyped it. You know, I assume those guys are doing the same thing. So I took these totals. Or I'm sorry, that's the interim total. Here's the grand total for this month, right? So I took this grand total and retyped it into this sheet for each of these months. And these are the meter totals, the billing totals, and this column is something I noticed. What we see is this total for the 5th month of 2017 is negative. So what we, yeah, you guys? Yeah. So what we want to see is positive numbers, because we use water, we don't send it back up to the mountain. And I'm not sure exactly what this is, but I try to account for it. If we go back to this guy, we see that the negatives appear. This one had one, so kind of lucky, I guess, in some of the categories. So we have 2 users who have been accounted negative, between negative 7,000 and 0, for a total of negative 12,000. So what I did was just add that number back into the total for a corrected value, right? And when we plot that year over year, this is what we get. So we have 2016, 2017, through 2021. And I colored this just so kind of get, it's a little bit clustery, you know, but you can just see an overall shape of what we're doing. And it's really similar. It's actually identical to that same one with the bar chart in the last sheet. So, you know, you can see the negatives here. This is uncorrected, so the negatives are still in here. There's some that are repeats. Some months are repetitious from the previous months. And this is the same data in a timeline format. This I really like, because we get to see what happens in, for example, a really wet year. 2019, right, was super duper wet. And you notice the overall height of this lump is a lot lower. We just don't want to use that much water. 2020 was really dry, so it peaks up. And then what happens at the tip of this peak? That was in is it July 1, right? Anybody know what happened July 1, 2020? Drought Declaration, right? Ta-da! And it brought us down, I think, you know, with enough information year over year. If we could bring this back, way back, we could see these trends just looking at them, you know? We can say our water use is going up year over year, or going down. And if we have this same information for production data, measurement at the springs, right? Then we can see the same thing. We can see long-term trends just with our eyes. And then beyond this, and I haven't done any yet because I really don't think it's our place, again. We can just do some statistical analysis on it, you know, and say, hey, what's our variance on these readings? How much is it? How much does it shift? What's the most likely outcome? And really, that's what JDS is going to be doing for us. So the more information we can give to them, the better job they can do of telling us what has happened and what might happen in the future. And really, that's the crux, I think, of solving the water moratorium, right? The question of the moratorium is what's going to happen in the future? That's how it's phrased. Will we have water? And it's kind of a, let me make sure I have my notes open here. Yeah, water. the other side of the water moratorium, after it's over, will be an estimate to the limit of our water production, really, is what we're after. We want to estimate what the limits are of our water production so that we can say we're going to have however many millions of water probably coming off the mountain, right? We can say, and what they call this is firm yield, right? The firm yield of our water system. And then we can say, well, do we want to add more users into that and reduce everybody else's share, or do we have enough to where anybody can use all of this up to however many extra users? You know, that's the question that we're trying to answer here. And the answer won't come from us, it'll come from JDS, and they need a lot of this to do it. So that's why I've been asking all year to get this stuff so that I can give it to them. So this is this corrected. This is the one that I had without the negatives, right? I was hoping that maybe we'd be able to see like a grow or a shrink, and it's just kind of random. You'd have to do some a little bit of statistics to really glean some more detailed information out of it. But that's pretty much where I'm at. And if anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to answer them to the best of my ability. Oh, and I'll share all this information. If anybody wants a link to these, just let me know. You can email me. My email is markletp@gmail.com, markletp. And I'm happy to talk about it. I don't know if you can tell. I'm kind of excited when I talk about stuff like this. I apologize. This is what I like. Anybody have questions?
I don't have questions, but this was the best part of the meeting. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And you are an underutilized resource, and this was, I can't, I'm not someone who can look at data and decide what to do, but there are people out there who can, and this is really priceless. I mean, one of the things I thought of is the untreated water is water in street trees.
Right.
Would be a good example.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, put it on the parks. You know what it like, and that's like we can come up with ideas, but I think that half of it is really in the board's lap to do it ethically. You know, like it's not up to us to say, oh, you know, it should work this way. We can say it could work this way. You know, and then leave it to them.
You got a whole new piping system that has to come from down in the mountain all the way down to here.
Yeah, I think it might be more rights than infrastructure.
Why? You got to get the water to the people that live in town if they want to water their. If you're saying you want to, water. You want anything that gets watered in your yard should not be treated water.
Well, Mike, I want to make sure that that's not something that I'm not saying that should happen. That was an example as to what we might be able to do with this data. That was a concept that was presented by somebody else that I thought was intriguing, and we can talk about it. I think it's kind of cool. Apparently people have talked about it in the past, but that's not what I'm asking for at this point.
Okay, well, I think that could be a huge expense to get.
Yeah.
Because you end up with two water systems.
Yeah, we'd have to do some analysis for sure.
You know, I went to the Colorado River meeting, was in Montrose last week, and heard, some of the smart guys talking about the river. And, we're 21 years into a drought cycle currently. And the smart guys there are saying there's a good chance we'll be in at least another 5 to 8. And it has to do with the amount of water in the Colorado River and, what that got to do with us up here on the mountain. Well, the big municipalities that are trying to find water, which is not available, they're paying $75,000 an acre foot on the Front Range for water, and they're willing to give farmers in Uncompahgre Valley about $1,000 an acre foot for the same water. So the big municipalities that are looking at this structure are finding water by what they call demand management, which basically is telling you how maybe here's some strategies that you could save some time on your water. One interesting thing I learned, and this has to do with land use planning, is that the biggest consumers of water are now people that are moving into the valley and living on 1 and 1.5 acre plots. And they're destroying a lot of the firm yield that's around. country, I mean, cities like best managed water companies in the world right now are probably Las Vegas, Nevada, Orange County, California, believe it or not. So they've done a lot of innovative things, so like taking sod out, actually paying people to remove every square foot of sod you take out, you get X amount of dollars. So one of the issues for us in the future is going to be finding water that may not live on the mountain up there. My sense is a lot of that's going to be in planning and zoning. Some of that, and the other issue is that the ditch companies may find themselves under a call structure that they can't deliver that water. So point being is that this is excellent data and we need more of it, so thank you.
Thanks. I agree. I also want to point out this, we also had a drought declaration earlier this year than we did last year, and I think that little divot comes from that. And also just in general, people were aware that this was going to be a drought year. I myself, like, I didn't water hardly at all, you know. So the use is down for 2021 compared to 2020. That seems like a reasonable explanation. I just thought that was interesting. Yeah, you can see the water merge right here. Yeah, this is where the use dropped off because it wasn't coming down the house, you know, wasn't coming into the house, so nobody's using it. But I think that a lot more of this is in order and has been for a long time, and I would love to know how we can get it, because I don't want to have to sue town to get the stuff that I feel like I have a right to ask for. You know, I want teamwork. This is what I've been after. Well,
no, stop.
Okay.
We can just, how about we just end it right there?
Cool.
I'm not gonna go there, so.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of what the intent is with the groupings, and I can bring in the there's a lot of creative things that can happen. You know. Yep. You're welcome.
Thank you, Thomas. That was awesome. You have something you want to say, or? Oh, sure. And then we will adjourn. Thank you, Bill. Whatever you want to say. Oh, we will adjourn after you
Going
say,
back to that
any other
part of
public
that ordinance, that the directive is to hear citizen issues about water. There was a woman here tonight, Marilee Hawes, who has an issue, and she's having a hard time presenting it. And I would ask you to perhaps reach out to her to get on your next agenda, because she really needs some help, and you're designated as a point of contact for her.
I have reached out to her. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And I would like to state also that all the information on what the town would need to do in order to support her in the cost was provided to the board, and it's in the board's hand, and it has been.
When was that provided?
I sent that out to the board right after the request came.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember. All right. We're adjourned. Thank you.